Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. I want to thank you all for your continued support, your questions, your comments, and all of your love. But I want to get straight into what is a bit of a hot topic after what was an incredible first race of the 2021 Formula One season, a battle for the ages, the duel in the desert between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, because quite incredibly the fastest car and driver of the weekend was beaten by wily cunning and strategy. Red Bull and Max Verstappen were undoubtedly the favourites for the race win, but it was Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes who came away victorious. But while the Grand Prix was an absolute classic, there was a moment of high contention which is still being debated. The ugly topic of track limits rearing its head. Max Verstappen pulled off an audacious move around the outside of Lewis Hamilton for the lead and for the win. But in dipping outside track limits, he had to give that position back. The question we have is, was that move illegal? And if it was, why was almost every other driver in that Grand Prix crossing that line without penalty? We're going to do our best to explain exactly why everything went down as it did and what needs to happen going forward in order that we don't have a repeat. Okay, question one. Was Verstappen's move legal or illegal? And this one's actually really simple. It's black and white. The move wasn't on. Article 27.3 of the sporting regulations state you're not allowed to go outside track limits, and for the benefit of doubt, track limits are the racing surface itself and the white lines that mark the edge of the track. The curbs don't cut it. You're not allowed to go out there other than to avoid an incident on track. And if you do go outside there, you're not allowed to gain what is termed, and this is key, a lasting advantage. Now, we could spend a lot of time debating whether Verstappen had actually completed his move on Lewis Hamilton by the time he exceeded track limits. But let's be in no doubt. A move through a corner isn't done until you're through the corner, and the exit curbs, the exit line at turn 4, that white line there is still considered to be part of the corner, just as if Max had cut inside the curbs at the apex of turn 4, the move would have been illegal. So the same is true for the exit curbs at turn 4 as well. He tried that inside move once at Kota back in 2017 with Kimi Raikkonen and lost that position there as well. So whether it's on the apex, whether it's on the exit, if you are going outside of the track limits, be it inside or outside, it's not on. The move won't stick. You have to give it back. Question 2 now. If Verstappen's move wasn't legitimate, how come the other drivers could all use that part of the track without penalty? And here's where it starts to get a little bit sticky and a little bit complicated. And in order to get to the bottom of it, we're going to have to rewind a little bit. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to make it totally clear that there is a huge irony in all of this, which is that Michael Masi, as FIA race director, has consistently tried to enforce track limits up at turn 4. His efforts to do so, though, have seemingly met opposition, flagrant disregard, and so he's been forced to come around to this compromise, which has led us to this position that we're in. The route, as I said, is a little bit in the past. Back in 2020, when we arrived in Bahrain for the Bahrain Grand Prix, in Michael's race notes, he had been absolutely clear that going outside track limits at turn 4 would not be tolerated, and for the avoidance of doubt, those track limits would be the white line. Anyone going beyond that would have their laps invalidated. But so many drivers went over that white line in free practice that it was deemed to be almost unpoliceable. And so for the race itself, the wording was slightly tweaked so that the drivers could go beyond that white line, because the track, with its natural limitations, with the gravel traps and the false grass that existed there, creating an almost self-policing nature to the exit of that corner. Now, when we returned for this year's race, those rules, that wording, was still in effect. But so many drivers took a liberty in free practice 1 that Michael again tried to enforce track limits up there at turn 4. But he gave them a little bit more leeway. Rather than cutting it down to just the white line, he extended it to the red and white curbing. In practice, if you ran beyond that red and white curbing, your lap would be invalidated. And what's key here is to remember that qualifying is still officially known as a practice session. It is qualifying practice. So this new ruling and the red and white curbs would be in effect for free practice 2, free practice 3, and qualifying. It would revert to what had existed in 2020 and for free practice 1 for the Grand Prix itself. Massey did, however, put in a caveat. He reminded all the drivers that Article 27.3 of the sporting regulations still existed. You couldn't go there into this seemingly unpoliceable part of the track and gain a lasting advantage. And that is why Lewis Hamilton's lines caught not only the attention of Red Bull Racing, but also of the FIA. You see, Lewis wasn't just dropping a wheel over the white line onto the red and white curbs beyond it. He was running so far beyond not only the white line and the red and white curbs that he actually found himself on the asphalt for the Sakir Grand Prix layout on the outer loop. That was a perceptible advantage. Red Bull queried it, the FIA noted it, and told him to tuck his elbows in. Essentially, and to use an oft-worn Australian phrase, to stop taking the piss. And that is why Lewis Hamilton got a verbal warning and the threat of a black and white flag if he continued to go that far beyond the white line. But Lewis was really unhappy. He believed that part of the track was unregulated, that the gravel trap and the fake grass created the natural limitations of the circuit, because that's what was written in the race notes. And you know what? From that perspective, he's absolutely right, because the point at which his lines became a worry fell down to interpretation, to human judgment. The white line, clearly defined. The red and white curbs, clearly defined. Taking the piss? That's a matter of opinion. And that's why we have controversy. Now, Christian Horner believed that Hamilton's line through turn 4 could have gained him as much as 0.2 of a second every time he did it. Conservative estimates have Lewis running out there just under 30 times during the Grand Prix. But if we give him the benefit of the doubt and reduce that to 25 multiplied by 0.2 gives us 5 seconds. Even if we drop it down to 20 times, it's 4 seconds. The question then is, isn't that a lasting advantage? And therein lies the dilemma. Racing drivers don't take the slowest line. They take the fastest. If they exceed track limits, it's in order to go faster. And unless they give that time, which they've gained back later on in the lap, that time gained becomes a lasting advantage. That's why I'm a stickler for track limits. These drivers are supposed to be the best in the world. The skill lies for them in getting a racing car around a racing track faster than your rivals. I've always argued there's more skill to sticking to the limits than achieving a faster time by abusing them. It's like a colouring book. Sure, you could finish it off really quickly if you just scribble over all the lines, but the artistry lies in the creation of something beautiful, sticking to the lines. Maybe that's a terrible comparison. I don't know. The laps, though, in motor racing, in Formula 1, that take your breath away are the ones where the racer is on the edge with nowhere to go. Those all or nothing laps in Monaco or Singapore where one small mistake, you're in the wall, you're done. But this goes both ways, because if we accept that it's permissible to exceed track limits, even in one corner, then I'd argue that in effect what we're saying is that these newly extended boundaries become part of the track. And so if you can drive there, you have to ask if you should also be able to overtake there. Some will still say no. Some will say absolutely yes. But the only way that you answer that question is through consistency. For me, it's either part of the track or it's not. The issue in Bahrain wasn't so much that the rule changed over the weekend, even though that did create some confusion. The issue that many watching the race, and some, it will have been their first race, is why were there two rules in effect for one and the same part of the track? It was legal to drive off the track, but it wasn't legal to race off the track. And last time I checked, this thing's called motor racing, not motor driving. There's also the already mentioned aspect of subjectivity. Massey's original intention and wording in 2020 gave absolute clarity. The white line was the limit. Even his practice ruling with the curbing in 2021 was clear. The red and white curbs were the limit. In the race, what was and was not permissible was ultimately an individual interpretation. When you allow freedom, but you place on it a caveat not to abuse that trust, you create the conditions for controversy. Michael wants track limits to mean something. That much is clear from the moves he's attempted to make. And even the team bosses involved in this race's controversy want to see change. Both have called for clarity and for a rule book that doesn't read like Shakespearean prose. There is perhaps a double irony this weekend that the controversy in Formula One hit at the exact same time that MotoGP was for the first time using pressure sensors around their circuit to determine track limits violations. Even one wheel off, and that's blotted your copybook. That's it. You've got your card marked. For me, it's simple. The solution lies in consistency. Enforce all track limits at all times, or don't enforce them at all. One rule for all, no human subjectivity, black and white, no grey areas. Then, just let them race.